Hey cats, this is Dev again, and it is the next day. It is August 1st, 2011. It is 1:24 in the afternoon, and I was going to do what I did with Addicted in Key and get here first thing in the morning and do this, but I had to finish off some elements of the upcoming box set, as well as deliver a small acoustic record that I did for these performances in England next week. And so my day has been altered somewhat. And here we are in the early afternoon as opposed to the early morning, and it is hot. So, yeah. We're going to do Deconstruction now. This is the production commentary for Deconstruction, and I'm going to have to keep talking because there's so much that went on with this record that I'm sure there's going to be a lot of thoughts during the listening of this. The band essentially is, I played everything on this record except for drums and the various guest vocals, of course, and the orchestra and whatnot. But it was pretty much an insular project. The way it was written was I had a goal in mind of what I wanted the record to feel like, and I basically started with a template for a bunch of songs that I had come up with ideas and creative sort of avenues to follow, and then I just illustrated it as I went, right? Like pick a tempo and just kind of went with it. The first song written on this record was Praise the Lord, and I when I was putting together the two drummers, Ryan and Dirk, I wanted to use people that had a certain personality that could still play like the heavy stuff, right? Like typically I find that drummers who play, like the grind beats and the blast beats and all that stuff, it's like a lot of times there's a personality type that comes with that, people who have a certain amount invested in being brutal or heavy or what have you. And so meeting Dirk was really cool because he was able to do all that stuff, but he had a really good sense of humor, and it was, a lot of fun to work with him. And Ryan as well, I wanted to use Ryan for some of the songs on the record because he is the live drummer for the DTP, so I wanted to make sure that he had a head start on that. And he actually really came to the table in a way that I didn't expect either in terms of the heavy stuff. A lot of people had asked why I didn't use Gene Hoglan on Deconstruction, but to me it's a pretty obvious reason that there's so much has been so much pressure from a certain element of the fan base, which is thankfully subsiding, to continue to do Strapping Young Lad even after my explanations as to why I don't want to do it. And I think that if I had included Gene, regardless of how awesome Gene is, it would have just fed that fire. So unfortunately I didn't use Gene for that. But the two guys that did the record, I don't think anybody else could have done as cool a job as they ended up doing. They just put a lot of effort into it. And again, that's no disrespect against Gene. It's one of the best musical moments of my life was getting to play with him. But strapping is what strapping is, and this is something different. Deconstruction is supposed to be a very stream of conscience record. It's supposed to be about the character trying to unravel the mysteries of creation and the meaning of life, and therefore he allows himself to go with one thought till the thought changes, and then follow that one, and then follow that one. So the structures of the songs are very random. There's not really other than Juular and maybe Poltergeist, there's not really songs involved on this record. It really is stream of conscience bits, right? And I think that if you look at it trying to be 9 songs, you're going to be disappointed. But if you look at it as being like maybe 70 little tiny pieces, then it makes a lot of sense. And in fact, that's how I ended up going about the recording of it. It was a daunting process to try and get it to the point where it is. But if I took it apart riff at a time and worked on each one of those as its own little piece in time, it seemed to work really well. Okay, so Deconstruction, here we go, starting with, of course, what is this song here? Praise the Lord. Okay, so Praise the Lord, I saw that on a car, that the words Praise the Lord. It was some hip little car that was driving around Vancouver that was slung really low to the ground. It said "Praise the Lord" on it, and I thought that was kind of cool. So, in reference to reconnecting to this particular energy, I thought that was a great way to start. There's a lot of religious connotations on this record that were essentially made to break through that, I think. Not even from my perspective, but the character, like the hang-ups in terms of sex or religion, ironically, and drugs and what have you. This song was recorded late at night, the demo. A lot of these sounds are from the demo. I recorded the vocals on this song 3 separate times to try and find the right take. The mix itself, done by Jens Bogren and myself in Sweden. We butted heads on certain elements of it. He didn't want it to be as chaotic as I needed it to be, but we ended up finding a compromise. These loops were all done in Ableton Live. The guitars, a lot of the ambience in the back is from a Pod X3 that I had a long delay set on, tapped to the tempo, and I just found loops and then cut it to the grid. I did all the falsetto vocals here at the same time as well. At one point I had assumed that I was going to use more female vocals on Deconstruction than I actually ended up using. Other than the choir, the only female voice is Floor Jansen in the song Pandemic, and she's in the verses. But essentially there's one female on every record, right? Che, Annika, Floor, and Katrina. The whole idea with the lyrics of this one was, as I was coming off marijuana and all these sort of things, there's always that temptation to reconnect to that artistic side of your temperament that was kind of exacerbated by drug intake. So this song is basically the characters trying to rationalize whether or not he should just do it again, right? It's not an advocation for drugs at all. It's the character saying, I wish I could do this. It would be so much easier for me to reconnect with this if I could just go back to my old habits, right? That's why the soda water and all these elements of it. This falsetto bit here is one of these sort of vocal techniques that I find if I'm relaxed and I'm sitting in front of a TV, it's effortless to do. However, if I'm put on the spot or if I actually do it in front of people at a studio, it becomes very difficult, and it sounds like a castrated monkey or something. Fading in these guitars. When this song was written, the first song for Deconstruction that was written was Stand. And I think this one was second, and the idea of it sort of slowly building was integral to the beginning of this record. I wanted to start mellow after the mellow ending of Addicted. This was a dilemma, this part for me as well, because I really didn't want to swear on any of the records, but then I decided that part of the letting go on Deconstruction was like, you're not going to do drugs. Of course I didn't do drugs while I was doing the record, but I decided to kind of hammer that home and just like commit to saying fuck there. And that's Paul Kerr from November's Doom that does the backgrounds there. I didn't really know Paul, but he had been contacting me through Twitter, and then I investigated his band when he mentioned that he wanted to be a part of this, and they were really cool. He's got a great voice. Big dude. There's a lot of layers on this part here. There's a there's one, and there. No, I want to know. I need to know. I know. So there's that. Drink the wine. So this is supposed to be where the character just like lets it go in an artistic sense to see what's going to happen. And then it's the catalyst for the rest of the record going to the dark places, and then it crests in Deconstruction where all of a sudden he realizes that the whole quest and the whole idea of letting it go for an artistic sense basically is, it's humorous in a way, because in the beginning there's all this drama about it, and it's just such a an overwhelming sort of existential dilemma that ends up being ultimately this journey that, although no worse for the wear, was ultimately not really important to go through. I mean, I think it was important to go through, but I guess the irony of it is that, you end up where you were in the beginning, right? So that old sort of thing. I was reading Paradise Lost, Milton, and like the Dante's Inferno a lot while I was doing this, and there's a bunch of quotes lyrically that are from that. That last part there, really far in the background, there's I'm talking to a friend of mine that was drinking a lot, and while I was making the record, he would phone me up and say, "Hey man, I have no idea how you don't drink, and it must be so much easier for you." And I'm going, "What do you mean it's fucking easy for me? It's hard." You know what I mean? Like, you're just being a puss, If you want to stop, you can stop. You obviously don't want to stop. And so a lot of praise the Lord, and a lot of this record in general is directed towards several friends of mine that while I was kind of becoming sober, there was this whole like, "Oh man, you're doing so good," and all this stuff, and I can't do that, and all this stuff. And I'm going, no, it's not that you can't, it's just that you don't want to, right? So it's hard for anybody, right? So okay, Stand. This is the first song, again, that I wrote for Deconstruction. While I wrote this, Mike St. John, who's the drummer for Ghost and also our, like I say, right-hand man for a lot of the live stuff now, he was doing the assistant engineering for me. I wrote this song while I was working with a band called Becoming the Archetype. I was writing this one, and I remember going in to Mike's room and saying, "Hey man, I wrote this thing that I think is really cool." But at that time, Mike wasn't familiar with heavy music and actually didn't want to be familiar with it. So I remember playing it for him, and he's like going, "Oh my god, dude, like, why would you choose to do something like that?" And at that point, it was, even that comment, it was good for me because I was able to recognize that the reason I wanted to do it is because I like it and because it's important to me, right? And that was something I think there was a bit of a dilemma about for me as well, because I thought on some level heavy music was spiritually like dangerous or something, and ultimately by doing this I recognize that it's just a choice and it's just music. There's nothing beyond that as far as I'm concerned. Okay, in the background here I had all this marching stuff, right? And I put a bunch of the vocals hidden in the reverb there to give that sort of, menacing feeling. The whole intro to Stand here is 2 minutes long, and in a lot of people's opinion that was like too long, and it makes the record take its time to start. But I think the whole idea with how long it takes for Deconstruction to get a full head of steam behind it is that I wanted to make people wait for it. It was important for me to make the statement that I'm going to do it in my own time, I'm going to do it in my own way, and then when it does happen and it does get a full head of steam behind it by about pandemic, it's going to be very difficult to stop it, right? This is where the orchestra started. We went to Prague and used the Prague Philharmonic, me and Mike St. John. In terms of the orchestration for that, I wrote all the music in Pro Tools, and I sent demos of my vocals and the orchestral parts to Mike, who transcribed it for Florian Mayer, who's the one that did all the orchestrations and wrote it out. Both those guys are brilliant. On this song, this is Ryan playing drums. This sort of sentiment, as I've come face to face with myself, the whole idea was starting Deconstruction with Stand was very important for me to be able to say, look, I'm going to stand up for what I believe in, and what I believe in is currently much different than the last time I was doing music like this, for whatever reason, age, sobriety, whatever, right? So Stand is a sentiment towards that end of just like, no matter where you are, you gotta, put your feet down and like make sure that you don't budge from your ideals, right? We went to Prague, like I say, Mike St. John and I, and we recorded the Prague Philharmonic Orchestra with Florian doing the translating, because I don't know theory, I know how to write it, but I remember we were in Prague and they were saying, what note is that? And I'm like, well, it's a 7th fret. And Florian would have to say, no, it's a C sharp, right? That's Mike Ackerfeld doing the background vocals in this one, and this is the Pan Am Choir. It's a 20-person choir from Amsterdam. And there's Mike again. Me and Florian and Mike St. Jean went from Prague, then we flew to Amsterdam to record this choir at Florian's buddy's studio. Again, this is Ryan Van Poederoy. I'm playing drums on this one. I was pretty specific with the drum parts in stand. I was actually pretty specific in the drum parts for all these songs. And these poor guys ended up having to make like a lot of cliff notes while we were in the studio. But both Ryan and Dirk were very, very diligent in learning the parts, like to the point, to like the smallest degree. It was actually quite amazing. We recorded both Ryan and Dirk at the same time at the factory studio with Sheldon again. 2 different kits in the room. Again, this is Jens that did the mix with this. I came in and he had done the drums, bass, guitar, and it was a very conservative, great sounding mix, but very conservative. And I was like, hey man, we got to turn up the samples and the orchestra and the choir and the distortion and the chaos and all this sort of stuff. And he was worried at first because he thought it was just going to turn into chaos until I assured him that that's exactly what I wanted it to be, right? So I think the mix is really good. I like it better at this volume than I do when it's cranked. Jens has got a very different approach to mixing than I do, and I think it's obviously much more learned than I am. Like my production and engineering skills are very like, you know, do it yourself, right? So there's things that I do that I think really work that professional engineers and mixers just, you know, refuse to let me do. But after some arm wrestling, we found compromise. I love Jens. He's an awesome guy. Okay, there's a guitar solo. I wanted to do a typical heavy metal guitar solo there. There's Mike going, no, I. Mike's always had one of the best death metal vocals. You know, his new Opeth stuff is, there's no death metal vocals on it. And, you know, I think this is actually the last thing he did before he gave up death metal vocals. So I'm pretty proud of that, I think. I've known Mike for years, and we have a lot of things in common, and he's been a good friend of mine for a long time. We used to phone each other when I was drinking. We used to phone each other, and it was a middle of the night for me, early morning in Sweden. We play each other demos and get loaded. In the background of this section here, you hear a bunch of movement, and that was the orchestra. You hear a guy was dropping sticks and like, but I kept it in there because I thought it added some texture to it, right? These hits, these really awkward sort of drum hits, they're really free time, and I had written it in free time, and then Ryan had to learn it in free time. He had some pretty interesting cliff notes for it, and it was really close. But what I ended up doing is I ended up like cutting these drums and moving them right to where the free times hits, because I had some really specific ideas of how I wanted it to feel there. It's really close though. All the guitars on this record were done direct with the Axe effects. One cable out. Show yourself. The sounds I've got on my Axe currently are, in my opinion, much better than I did on this record. But it was one of these things where I had a very limited budget to do Deconstruction with, and the choir and orchestra alone cost me the entire budget. Plus I had to pay for 2 drummers and Jens the mix and Anthony Clarkson who did the artwork, and it was an immense expenditure for this. I think my budget for the record was $22,000 American, which if you haven't done records sounds like a hell of a lot of money, but if you're in a band you know that that's, you know, slightly below average, if not quite a bit below average what a normal record costs. And I ended up spending close to 60 on this record, so I put myself pretty deep in debt. So a lot of the guitars and a lot of the bass and things like this, I had very little time to record it, so I had to pound through the recordings, you know, and I used the Axe effects and got a pretty good sound, but now the sounds I got on my Axe I think are the best heavy sounds that I've ever had, right? This was close, it was getting there at this time. And I used, again, just a Sans amp for the bass, and I did it all in my bedroom, right? So it was like, well, not my bedroom, actually my buddy's garage, but with my bedroom gear, right? This choir part here, the big 3-part gospel thing, I had to go into the choir and tell them, you know, I wanted it to sound like a gospel choir. those poor folks in the choir, man, they just thought I was bananas. There's one guy, or it's like 3 guys in the bass section that got it. They came up after like, man, this is really cool, man. Like, this is... But then there's like, you know, a bunch of 45-year-old sopranos that have to sing about farting and masturbating, and they were like kind of pissed. But it cost me, I had to take out a loan for it, so I was just like, no, sing it. Okay. Juular. Okay. The song was originally called Jugular, but I misspelt it. I forgot the G. And so I ended up seeing it every day as Juular. And then I thought, oh, that'd be a good name for a character. And like the character is supposed to be this religious zealot that believes that his penance to his god is to like do something absurd. And in this case, it's like blowing into a jug for eternity, right? And as a result of him thinking that that's what's going to get him into this quote-unquote heaven, he's judgmental about everybody else, you know. And my whole idea with this is being religion the same, whether or not it's Christianity or Islam or Jehovah's Witness, or, you know, in a lot of ways Buddhism, and a lot of things. There's just this real sense that the dogma involved with religion is more important than any connection to things that are beautiful, right? So I can't say that I think that religion is all bad. I certainly don't. But when I encounter people that have a lot of their own personality invested in just proving to other people that they're right, rather than trying to express anything beautiful, then I find it discouraging, right? So Juular became this personification of that energy, of this religious zealot that, you know, is essentially telling everybody else that they're going to hell because they're not doing what he's doing, right? And what he's doing is ridiculous, right? So he's on this train pounding through hell, and then I'm supposed to be talking to him in the verses calmly, like, why are you doing this, dude? And then Isan, who is the guest on this song, is supposed to play Juular, right? He's this guy who's like, I survived, you know? It's like, you're damned, God's damning you, right? And at the end of the song, in my head, in the way that the play goes, Juular in this train falls off a cliff, and in the beginning of the song, he falls out of the sky. So it's like, what is it, Sisyphus? That guy that's eternally pushing the rock up the hill? That's sort of, it's like, again, I was, you know, reading, you know, Divine Comedy and looking at the Doré engraving so much. It's essentially just one of those stories, right? And I'd like to point out as well that it's all just a story, and it's all just supposed to be artwork. I'm not trying to like make any profound statements about religion or spirituality. It's just, it was interesting to me, right? I don't know shit. In the back there's a bunch of the bells and all these arpeggios were actually last minute additions, and I actually did those with Pro Tools plugins. I remember the recording for Juular, bass and guitar were really rough for me. I didn't really edit it, and when I put together the remix files for this box set, I remember listening to the bass and I was just like, wow, that was a shit performance. But again, we had like basically one take and I just kind of chopped it up, right? So Dirk played on this one, and live Ryan plays it as well. And live we do it with triplets on the drums, kick, kick, snare, kick, kick, snare. But Dirk, you know, was a banana and did it like kick, 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 kick all the way through, and you'll hear that in the remix. I know that Ryan can do that as well, but the consistency of it live is more important than just the blur, right? So, but I think it's really a cool approach here. And Dirk did something insane on that last part where he's doing this crossover from the hat to the blast. It was insane. This part I actually cut the snare right to the grid, just because I was trying to get it to line up with all these other loops, and I didn't want anything to be too loose, right? I really like this song. It's cool. It's the only real song on the record. Okay. Planet of the Apes. Of course, it's a Meshuggah riff, right? There's no getting away from it, right? I love Meshuggah. I love Frederick. I love the guys in the band. I've toured with them. They're great friends. They're an awesome band. However, that whole scene where there's just so many bands that like take advantage of how awesome Meshuggah are, and it's becoming less and less attributed that Meshuggah did that, right? And you know, I know that, you know, Fred's got kids, and you know, the guys that got kids in the band, and everybody's just trying to get by, right? And sometimes I think it's funny how, you know, people forget how much Meshuggah led and continues to lead the pack in terms of, rhythmic innovation. So I wrote this riff, and at the time I was thinking, I really like this riff because it's got this melodic structure I could put some awkward vocals over, but it's a Meshuggah riff, and I don't want to, be one of those guys. But then after a while, I liked the song so much, I was like, you know what? I can get away with it if I just, call myself out on it. So that's where that we rip off Meshuggah quote comes from. This vocal, I tried to do a different vocal style for me where I just, spoke loudly as opposed to yelled. And all the vocals here and the lyrics are about, being a father and being a family man and how the connection to, how I feel about heavy music compared to the fear that was kind of in Juular, the song prior, where, this boy must die, talking about myself. The only way I can continue is if I, become a martyr for whatever bullshit cause, right? So with this one, it's more of a reassessment of that. And it's I stay heavy for my God, right? And the whole idea of God in this sense, in Planet of the Apes, is more about, it's a metaphor for, whatever that God may be, responsibility or family or myself or whatever, right? It's, there's no answers on Deconstruction. It's all questions, right? The melody behind there is basically what the orchestra did with this one. There's less orchestral parts in Planet of the Apes than some of the other songs. And I mean, considering it's also 12 minutes or whatever the hell this song is, it's we had 4 hours to record the orchestra. Just to be perfectly clear, we had no money, even though it cost a fortune, we had no money to let the orchestra see the parts before. They sight read the whole thing, and they did a good job. There were certain parts of the orchestras, though, that you'll hear in the tracks in Juular where there's some squeaks and some wrong notes and some clams and all that, but really, they had one take through all the songs. It was hundreds of minutes worth of music to sight read in 4 hours, and I think they did a great job, right? Choir, too, here, right? Tungsten body, glowing mind, the whole idea is just getting stronger as a spiritual entity. It's you have to harden your mind, harden your body, but also have to surrender, I think if the acquisition of power is your primary motivation in life, even if that's the true nature of humanity, even if humans are truly just sharks by nature, I think true evolution happens from, in some ways, denying the things that are accessible and gratifying yet ultimately cause problems. So, the glowing mind, the whole idea is here's that. Yeah, there it is. I mean, lyrically, that has nothing to do with the song. It was almost like a little bridge into a real Meshuggah part. The vocals behind that there, I was very proud of the rhythms there. Because nothing really starts on the one. It was definitely an interesting place to put all those lyrical ideas, right? And here too. All this is directly taken from the Divine Comedy. That lyrical front there. Side by side, animals in a row. This section here reminds me of Dream Theater. I played this on the bass too. I was pretty proud of that. As well, you'll hear the vocals where they land there. On one level, what I wanted to do with Deconstruction was make a statement that sounded completely chaotic, but layers so many elements on each level of the chaos that when you dissected it, you realize that it's organized, every element. There's nothing random on Deconstruction, whereas there was a lot of improvisation and sort of, allowing bygones to be bygones with Ghosts and Addicted and to a certain extent Key. Deconstruction is absolutely bulletproof in terms of how it goes together. There's a sense of it being chaotic, but it's not. That reminds me of Monument by Strapping Young Lad. When I was doing the New Black, I remember there was a certain aesthetic that I was experimenting with that record with, Ableton Live, doing certain things with pitch shifting, and I incorporated that in this song. and then it changes here. You know, at this point, it's like, I remember when I was writing this, I remember thinking, it's just such a oppressive, relentless, not only sentiment, but, you know, emotional onslaught, this whole deconstruction album and process, that I decided about halfway through it that I wanted to break up the parts and give it enough breathing room for people to, you know, not get overwhelmed to the point where they shut down, right? However, in hindsight, people who do listen to it, I've been around people who've listened to it for the first time and they shut down by the middle of Juular, so, you know. This part here was a guitar solo, and I remember hearing it after I'd finished the solo, and I was just like, wow, that is a really shitty mid-80s guitar solo. So I put this in instead. A lot of what I tried to do lyrically with these little parts is just add texture, right? This is Tommy from Between the Buried and Me. We did a tour last year with Between the Buried and Me, Cynic, and Scale the Summit. And I really like Tommy, I really like Paul, I really like Cynic, I really like everybody on that tour. So when I was looking for people to work with it, I got inspired to ask Tommy, and he did a great job, right? I wrote the parts for him, I put the lyrics down in a demo form and asked him to redo it, and he did a great job. In the background, you hear the choir saying cinnamon, synonym, cinnamon, synonym, and I had like, she sells seashells by the seashore and all this sort of thing. I had put tongue twisters in there to try and piss the choir off, and not only did it piss them off, but they actually just ended up not doing it. So good to know that I wasted a bunch of time doing it. I used the PV. All this stuff is my my PV Flying V, and all the stuff with the whammy bars and HP Special PV. Use the Sadowski bass on this. I got a fretless and I got a fretted, best bass ever. I like where this starts. The Please Don't Lie is like cry, whatever the hell it is. I like where that starts. That rhythm in the background, that there. I like that. I tried to find notes that if I was going to do sort of random sounding things and arpeggios, I wanted to find notes that I personally find interesting. Like, you know, there's people who do really complicated music much, much better than I could ever do, like Zappa or Stravinsky. I mean, that's a completely different league than what I do. However, I found that, for example, Zappa, as much as I love and respect Zappa and think he's an untouchable, brilliant, you know, thinker and musician, again, far beyond anything that I could ever be, I didn't like his note choices. They were always very placid sounding. There was never any real like danger I sensed in the note choices. The choices I liked were always like Zeppelin, you know, like whole tone and suspended and shit like that. So whenever I tried to sort of rip off Zappa in terms of my arpeggiations and shit like this, I always tried to incorporate more sort of like Zeppelin, sort of Pink Floyd tonalities. This section I really like. The whole sentiment at the end of this battle, you know, and like the whole standing up for your family thing. It's like, I'm sorry guys, because I stand for love and that's it. One is all, collected. That goes back to Syncestra. Tungsten body, glowing mind, reiterate that. Sounds like some sort of 80s synth ballad thing. Remember when I was a kid, I used to do puppet shows to, you know, I Could Give You a Mirror by the Eurythmics. I love that sort of poppy, sort of synthy sort of stuff. All the world's been waiting for the news. I think there's a sense of irony in a lot of these things that I say on this record, because it goes back to like religion, you know, like the good news, and like, you know, the whole idea of, you know, like this sort of, I think that in my opinion, and I could be very much wrong about almost everything, I like this solo. This is me. My sort of random bullshit. This is like one take, I think. Obviously. But then I think one of the things that I do like about, what was I saying there? About the whole connection with religion and all that is, you know, religion, conspiracy, you know, aliens, all this sort of stuff, regardless of whether or not it makes sense or is the truth, which I have no bearing of. I'm not smart enough to know these things or aware enough. I'm pretty ignorant. But the thing that I don't like about it is it definitely removes accountability personally if you can like attribute things that happen to other things, right? So I think if you keep it all within you, like whether or not it's like fate versus free will or whatever, just like your decisions are your own, the things that happen to you are just because they happen. I think if you can keep that frame of mind, makes it a lot easier to like get through life, at least for me, without having to blame or attribute it to something beyond you, right? Okay, Sumeria. My lawyer and my good friend Jeff Cohen, who owns Sumerian Records with Ash, he had phoned me up one day and we were having a conversation, and he would talk about, he was like, hey, have you ever read Gilgamesh, the original Sumerian tale, and how it's, you know, his point of view, which I thought was really interesting, was how the earliest known human text still plays on the exact same you know, sort of dynamics that we have going on for us today, you know, like evolutionarily, I guess. It's interesting to see how similar the ancients were to where we are now, right? My view on Sumerian culture and like the whole 2012 thing, I mean, I have no view. It just doesn't, it's not even a part of my, my frame of reference, in all honesty. I pay attention to some other people I know that are building gardens and, you know, telling me to like batten down the hatches, but I mean, shit. If something happens in 2012, I'm going to enjoy myself before then, and, you know, I prefer not to live in a post-apocalyptic Blade Runner-esque scenario if that's the case, so, you know, maybe it'll just take us all at the same time, right? So anyway, this song is based on that conversation I had with Jeff, and how, you know, human nature is essentially this kind of constant throughout history to a larger or greater degree. This sentiment here I like, you know, through anger we hunger for God. It's like, you know, still that need for something beyond us, and a way to kind of project ourselves into that is like war and aggression and all this, right? Going back to the whole Eurythmics thing, yeah, I mean, this is Sweet Dreams Are Made of This, right? It's like my whole view with deconstruction is to like take it back to my childhood, take it back to the most puerile things that I had experienced and that I had stood for, and then try and figure out what my nature is artistically as a result of exploring that. I wanted a breakdown. I'd never done a breakdown in music before. You know, it's like the whole Bury Your Dead, and, you know, I worked with Misery Signals and Bleeding Through and Darkest Hour and all that. I mean, it's never been a big thing for me, but I thought it was kind of funny, right? So I threw in a breakdown of this one. I tried to make it all land on the one, right? So if you're like banging your heads, your head always lands on the one, right? So, and this is Joe DePlanter from Gojira singing in this one. I love Gojira. I'm just so not into metal right now, but Gojira is one band that I fucking absolutely love. This here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3. I like that. So I guess it's like 1, 2, and 3 or something. Okay, there's Joe. There's a bunch of Ableton loops in the back there. I remember Joe had sent me these tracks, and dude, he had gone purple in the face tracking these. He was so into it. It was great. He sent me the tracks, and I'm afraid that when he asked me what I thought, I'd heard the wrong tracks, and I was just like, I don't know, man, maybe you could do it a little heavier, but I hadn't heard the right tracks, and I kind of bummed him out there for a minute, which sucks. And then when I actually brought up the real tracks, I realized how amazing it was, and I felt like an idiot. And so I sang on a Gojira track. We sort of swapped back and forth. I sang on a Blood and Salt for him with the Sea Shepherd discs that they'd done. And then we ended up having a 2-hour-long conversation after it one day, and realizing that we had a lot in common. I had a lot of love for him, and he's a very sensitive, environmentally minded, you know, artist, and I absolutely love Joe. Nothing but love for that guy and his band. This little arpeggio in the background, again, going back to the sort of Zappa-esque sort of things, a lot of what his techniques were, that, as far as I can tell, was, you know, augmenting these arpeggios with like xylophones and marimbas and like, you know, sort of percussion instruments. And so I tried to really incorporate that on this. Started that on the Alien record with strapping. I love this, Joe here. Shower the world where it's trying to be, how the angels. At first it was angels have taken their leave, but I felt it was just too much of the religious imagery. So I put memories instead. And I like that too, because now the memories are back, but they're lying to me. In fact, it's like a way of saying, you know, hindsight is 20/20, right? Forever. So this Sumeria part here, you know, you're saying known in my day. There's a sense as well of like a personal investment in an artistic integrity, and how, you know, I think as artists, a lot of us just feel like unvalidated unless we're like recognized in our own time, when ultimately it's of no consequence either way. So I added this at the end as another reprieve. I wanted to give the record some more breath, just like we did in the middle of Planet of the Apes there. And then the first person that came into my mind was Paul Masvidal, who's just such a sensitive person. And he's just like, anytime I've heard Paul do heavy stuff recently, it seems like such an odd fit, because he is such an incredibly sensitive human, right? So I asked him to do it. He gave me the vocoder tracks, which were sort of symbolic of Cynic. But he asked if I could sort of put it down in the mix so it wasn't as much. And I did that. I like the idea because it's almost like talking to your father in a way. You know, the old man is so proud tonight, right? And that can also refer to like the whole typical thoughts of Satan or what have you, right? A lot of those thoughts I needed to like address, and I needed to kind of purge, right, in order to come to a conclusion that allowed me to artistically move on. And the climax, of course, is in the song Deconstruction. Unfortunately, when I did the layout for Deconstruction, because I was doing a layout for Deconstruction, Ghost, putting the band together, getting all this stuff mixed, I fucked up on tons of the credits. And one of the things that I fucked up on is I didn't even put Paul's name in the credits. And he's such a huge part of it. So among the things that I feel stupid about is that. So I'm going to rectify that in the box set and the future pressings. Sorry, Paul. Okay, Mighty Masturbator. I had started writing this song years ago, during Syncastra. The whole idea of this record and this particular part, it's a 16-minute long song, and, you know, people had always said, hey, you know, we want you to do guitar heavy stuff, we want you to do like progressive music, and I had often said to myself, hey man, I don't like the idea of doing wanky masturbatory music just for the sake of it. And in fact, a lot of progressive music that I hear, my impression of it is it's masturbatory bullshit, right? So I thought, okay, well, if I'm gonna do a song that's masturbatory bullshit, I wanted it to go through a bunch of phases and moods and make it real theatrical and end with the sentiment that, hey, this is masturbatory bullshit, right? And Ziltoid comes in and makes that presentation essentially. But in the beginning, it's supposed to be this real melodramatic, Phantom of the Opera-esque, you know, I'm out in the studio and I'm working on a plan to like protect my family's future and, you know, all this shit. It's supposed to be, you know, really Andrew Lloyd Webber-ish, right? And then the next part, of course, the whole record refers to my back catalog. It goes back to Noisescapes and Strapping and Ocean. Everything is referred to on Deconstruction. And of course, this next part, which is obviously a reference to Numbered off of Addicted. You know, it's just a darker, minor version of it, right? Like the whole idea of Numbered, you know, it's like, I'm all right to fly, I'm all right to do this, let's do this, come on guys, let's be brave and attack this. And then there's this sort of, you know, oppressive sense when it comes back as, you know, we're in the middle of Deconstruction. Was it the right idea? Is this something that was like, you know, gonna cause me mental and artistic duress in the future, right? The drum parts on this is Ryan playing this song. Oh, I should have mentioned it was Dirk playing Sumeria. It's Ryan playing the intro of Mighty Masturbator. When it comes to the halfway point, Dirk takes over. So this is both Ryan and Dirk playing on the Masturbator. My thought with the drum parts on this is I kind of wrote this one on the spot, and so Ryan had to learn it. I wanted the second snare hit to be a ghost note, and it didn't end up being that way, so I consider that something that I will always hear. The boom, boom, pow, ghost, boom, boom, pow, ghost. But right now it's pow, pow. Bass sounds great. That's that Sadowski again. That thing's a monster. This part here is kind of cool because it's where the ghost, but it's like the shift here. I wanted it to sound like it was melting. Like everything eventually catches up to the melt, right? and then it melts again. I really like the idea of being able to like make music that flows like, you know, like a painting in a lot of ways, right? And therefore, the riffs tend to be very, you know, these non-linear sort of blobs, right? But I like the idea of it morphing into things, but consciously so. I didn't want to use Pro Tools to do that, so all this was things that Ryan had to learn. Way in the back here, there's a part here that Jens insisted that I turn down, and I wish he hadn't. You can barely hear it, but it was one of those compromises at the end. He was like, no, you need to turn that down. I was like, no, that's the thing, right? And then it comes back here. I understand why you want to do it, so it was more impactful a second time, but I wanted to have just the bells the first time. This vocal take was a lot of fun for me to sing because I just had a group of lyrics and they just sort of spoke it over it with notes that work within it, right? God, it is hot here right now. Holy crap. So this is like the whole, like, it's climaxing to this, like, I finally found a way to save the world. And that's why this next part's supposed to be comedic, because it's like, well, of course you can't save the world. All the drama in the world and all this bullshit that comes along with the artistic process is ultimately a source of artistic ego. I think that, to be honest, to be an effective artist and performer, you need a level of narcissism that is probably, you know, very distasteful for the people that aren't artists, and, you know, probably look at folks like myself and you all who are artists and just be like, well, these people are bananas, right? But I think there's a difference between a healthy sense of narcissism and being able to, like, you know, observe what's going on and perhaps poke fun at it, or at least, if not poke fun at it, like, you know, sort of make light of it, versus a sense of narcissism that allows you to think that everything you do is of utmost importance, which I think while I was doing Alien and Infinity, that's absolutely where I was at, and that was exacerbated by drugs, right? Now this rhythm here I like. I think it's like, there's series of 5 over 4, right? So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I like that. But then it's like with the drums doing 4 over it, it's like the beat just keeps like shifting. But it doesn't morph, in my opinion, like Meshuggah does with sort of Philip Glass-esque sort of things. This is just like 5 things happening at the same time that ultimately end up in the same place eventually. I really like that. Because ultimately, you know, you got 7s, 5s, 3s, 4s, 2s. It's all going to end up cresting at some point. It sounds like a big watch, right? Like the bass in the background. Ding, 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 while the snare is still doing the constant 16ths. I mean, I like this, man. This is one of those riffs like the end of Key that I kind of, you know, had a boner for myself while I written it. I was like, check me out, guys. I'm doing 5 over 4. I like this. The same idea rhythmically, it's just with a different drum beat here and like tight harmonies. Now it's supposed to count down, referring back to the beginning of Syncestra. I mean, there's so many references, I'll just point out the ones that just grab my attention. And then it's supposed to do pi here, you know, 3.14, but it doesn't go into pi, it gets stuck at the 4, right? And then it morphs, and this is a part of the original Tray Stores was the name of this next section, which is, you'll hear on the demo, it was like a 12-minute long piece. I just used the ending. The idea here is that on the quest, the character decides to go to the universe. He goes to Alpha Centauri to present his perception of what human beings are truly meant to represent, in hopes that we can convince the superior, quote-unquote, superior alien overlords. This is all fantasy Star Wars shit. He's trying to convince these alien overlords that on some level human beings are worthy of being able to stay on this beautiful planet, you know? And so the humans go to Alpha Centauri, or like the Vega system or whatever, it doesn't matter, to present in front of this alien council the things that make us unique as humans, right? So that's supposed to be like a preacher. He's like representing the religious kind of perspective of humanity, and he's saying it to the aliens, right? And so all the humans get together in this kind of like big dance, this big sort of like interactive presentation to this alien council, right? And they come to say, hey, we praise God, we believe in, this metaphor of God, whatever it is, mathematics or science or what have you. And then as they're presenting it, the aliens just very subtly in their response, they're sort of saying, well, take us further with this. And they sort of throw them a bone that leads them ultimately to saying, we praise ourselves. And then they throw them one more bone, and then finally the truth is out. They say, well, we praise Satan, and basically Satan is that, selfish, no accountability, right? It goes as far as, our fingertips, and that's when the most heinous things happen, right? And then all of a sudden they're like, kind of banished from this collective, right? I'm a nerd, what can I tell you? I played Dungeons and Dragons, watched too much Star Trek. So here they are. A whole faction, millions of humans are saying, give it up your world, right? And then all the women, from Earth are going, oh. And everybody's dancing. It's like, that shitty part in the second Matrix movie where apparently, the year 2060 looks like a 1993 rave. Same shit. And then it's like, me or somebody or a singer from a heavy metal, whatever it is, saying, I see, all I have seen, we've always been there. This is us, going back to the whole, Sumeria and Gilgamesh, human nature's constant sort of thing. Greg from Dillinger Escape Plan, the guy on Twitter put us both in contact, and since then I've, become good friends with Greg and Dillinger, and one of my favorite bands, amazing dude, intense amounts of energy, perfect for this party, wailed it. And so he's supposed to be like the preacher that's standing up on the pulpit in front of these aliens, around, a red landscape of millions of humans, billions of humans saying, and this alien's referring to them. Alien's like, so you come around, and we know what you've come for, yeah? And we are one of mind, and we are home, right? So essentially, they're saying, well, we could be God if you wanted it to be. It's all a metaphor, right? And then, now he's saying, we praise ourselves, we can't get past the fact that maybe there's, there is no accountability. Maybe we architect our own destiny, right? Destiny, I mean. And the aliens come back. Now we come alive. Now we see what you're saying. And you've been over time. You've taken your time getting to this point. If we are one of mind, if we meditate, then we're all God. So God is supposed to be the collective, right? And so the humans freak out. They can't handle that. So they're saying, we praise Satan. He lives inside of our hearts, And then the gig's up at this point. And then they leave pissed. Now they don't like the aliens. They're like, well, fuck you. What do you mean? It's it's all up to us? You mean there's nothing more than the earth and sand and water, and we all just have to fucking take care of each other? Fuck you, man. It's a tax-free organization we're running here. Who the hell do you think you are? Okay. And so now the humans are essentially saying, they're looking for martyrs. The whole symptom of martyrdom is just such a big deal, right? Everybody's looking for a hero, and everybody's looking to be a hero. And specifically with media and with music and actors and all this shit, there's this real sense that people want to believe that anybody who writes a song or is in a movie is on somehow a higher level than the rest of us, and that maybe they have some sort of privileged information. Again, it's this sort of sense that, there's got to be something more than just our own backyard, because if there isn't, that makes us all personally accountable, and that's terrifying, right? And so now, basically, the character is starting to be privy to this, and he's saying, I'm turning back, I don't want to. I'm turning away from the world, right? This whole environment that he knew, this whole reality scheme is becoming more and more of a facade, right? And then he's like, musically, I was trying to throw this in. These are only equations. This is only a problem. You know, I think throughout the record there's little moments here where it's like an observation on the process, you know, like the Meshuggah thing and like that line, and you know, and like at the end of Deconstruction, we're not finished yet, you know what I mean? It's like, so amidst all the drama and the hyperbole of Deconstruction, there's a real sense that it's under control and being observed by a part of my artistic process that is not participating in the chaos and the drama. And that's ultimately what Ghost is about. It's about writing from that point of view. So at this point, it's like, if you want to carry on with the story, the humans have divided into factions, and they're saying, you know, the one guy's just like, why don't we just leave? You know, why don't you follow me? I'm the one, right? It's like, you know, L. Ron Hubbard's sort of like Scientology cult bullshit, where there's just human beings that need that sort of, you know, attention, right? And now hunger does what sorrow could never do, straight from the Divine Comedy. Feed. So the whole idea is, it's just like, you know, your fears and your sorrow and one thing add desperation, but really when it comes down to like the fight or flight, you know, it's like that warrior mentality, that sort of primal instinct is ultimately going to win. So the time is now. So what happens? At the end of this masturbatory bullshit Star Trek metaphor that, you know, was the full intention of writing a song like this, Ziltoid concludes it by turning it into a carnival. And all his like rhetoric in here about like, see the vagina-faced lady and he's saying, see the child staring vacuously into the infinite void. He's talking about that side of the artistic temperament that feels it necessary to pontificate and all this sort of crap, right? This piece of music is taken from the Christine demos from Infinity. I had put out Christine plus 4 demos. There's an EP years ago. This was a part of a song called Processional, but the idea of doing it with an orchestra and a choir was just like too good to pass up. And I have like the Ziltoid almost like wrap up this big sort of dramatic sci-fi piece of music with this, you know, sort of silly sentiment is exactly the only way I feel like I could have ended a song like this. If it had ended with, you know, some sort of conclusion or some sort of hypothesis that me and my artistic process had devised, there's no way I could live with it not being a pretentious piece of shit prog metal, you know, jerk-off fest, right? So by ending it with this, I think what I'm trying to do is like either ironically or sort of tongue-in-cheek saying, look, yeah, it's okay to go to these places artistically and creatively, like we had just done with the whole alien thing and what have you, but ultimately, it's just for fun. It's just creativity getting an outlet, right? So amen to that, ladies and gentlemen. That's fucking awesome. At the end, you hear the guys in the orchestra laugh. This one guy giggles. He goes, hee hee hee. Check it out. I love that. Okay, Pandemic. I wanted to write a song that had the same sort of speed and like momentum as a song like Shitstorm, but with a completely different frame of mind. It's not a negative, toxic statement. It's just a relentless kind of momentum-driven, heavy song, right? Wandering soul of mine, right? At this point, the character, and I use the word character loosely because of course it's me, but it's not directly me. It's that, if it makes sense, it's that artistic sentiment in me that is trying to be like purged or exercised, or if not the sentiment and the artistic temperament, the hang-ups about these certain things, about the existential dilemmas are trying to be purged, right? I always felt like I wanted a soprano to do this part, but when we had got to do the orchestra thing, we had forgotten to orchestrate. We had forgotten to write it into the score. And both Florian and I were just like, oh shit, what are we going to do now? So Florian says, well, hey, there's this girl from my hometown, Floriansen, who sings, you know, for these bands, and she's absolutely amazing, right? So he got in touch with her for me, and then she sang and just knocked it out of the park. Jesus Lord, man. Only God, hold me, hold me, only God, hold me, hold me, Holy Ghost. There's all the way through the record, there's tons of things going on at the same time. I like this. Because in the back, there's these digital things going that add a kind of slower, sort of melting vibe to a very fast thing. Dirk, of course, played the drums to this, and while Dirk was playing this song in the studio, both Ryan, me, and Mike St. Jean were watching him do it going, Jesus Christ, man, he might be the best metal drummer ever. Pandemic, I farted. Here was this part where these sopranos just hated me. And they said, well, what's this song about? Why is it called Pandemic? And I mean, this isn't what it's about, but just to be like a dick, I went into the studio, I said, oh, it's about a pandemic that's spread through flatulence, right? So every time someone farts, it gives somebody else a disease. And you should see the looks of these people. They're just like, oh my God, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. And again, I started getting to the point where I was just like, yeah, I'm making this statement, and I'm just so not into like hanging out with artists, I'm not into hanging out with, pretentious, douches, right? I like people with a good sense of humor, and I like people that work for a living, and I like people that, in a zombie apocalypse, the people that I can trust that, we're going to be able to build a fort together, and not somebody's going to sit there with their hand against their forehead saying, woe is me, right? So I found that, when I run into people like that, the first thing I try and do is just like piss them off, and base humor seems to be the best way to do it. So that definitely worked in that situation as well. Here's me doing one of my 4 licks that I know, with tablas behind it. By this point of the record, of course, it's like got that head of steam on it that I was talking about during Stan. And the climax of the record is Deconstruction. Just like, every album's got a title track, Addicted, Key, Deconstruction, Ghost. And this one is supposed to be where the character is presented with the meaning of life. And so to make it start the way I wanted to, that's my fart, ladies and gentlemen. So this is me and Adrian Mottram, who is the assistant engineer during Key.
Excuse me, this is my point with the brain. At the end of the day...
Now, the whole idea is supposed to be 2 philosophers talking in a jazz club, like with berets and just totally being the pretentious kind of like philosophical blah 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 that you find. You have a toke and then you sit around talking about whether or not trees dream. A lot of shit that you do when you're like 23 years old and you're getting a bachelor's of arts in philosophy that ultimately leads you to working at Starbucks. We all did it. So that's what this beginning was supposed to be. And the whole idea is like while these philosophers are carrying on about these, lofty ideals, they're still human and they're still like have to shit and fart and giving birth and like the real base things that I think grounds us to the animals, right? I want to eat myself like the flesh of ancient gods. So essentially it's saying, I want to like acknowledge that my true nature, whatever that may be, is also linked to the past, the whole Sumerian idea. So hear me saying, okay, well, if what it's about is like God and sex and money, then... So it's basically a stream of conscience rant that I tried to like punctuate with choirs. Sex. Disease. So this whole part, the guitar in this was very difficult to record, actually, to make it tight. So here's the whole thing. Bars closed. I'm an artist. It's just like since the beginning of the song, beginning of the album, where it was like, praise the Lord, and maybe we should get back into doing drugs and drinking. Basically, by this part, one of the conclusions that the characters come through is like, well, bars closed, man. I'm not a drinker anymore. I'm not a smoker anymore. You know what I am, though? I'm an artist. And I'm going to explore these things without the fear of people thinking I'm an idiot. Without heart, there's no art. And then here's me, another part of me that's freaking out, like shitstorm type Devin, where it's like, oh, it's an infinite void. Oh, I'm so terrified. Oh, woe is me. What's going to happen? Oh, my God. So I tried to reconnect with that. And then the current me is just saying, enough. I've had enough of this shit. And I'm not afraid of fear. And then he's like saying, get it out of your system. Like, get all this shit out of your system, all this religious, sex, drug bullshit, get out of your system. And so he shits himself. It's like it's a purge. He's got diarrhea. He's like, get it out of your system. So that's why he's shitting himself here. Then he's like, show me. Come on. He keeps egging the universe. He's like, show me the true nature of this whole quest, right? guitar part sucks to play. It's impossible to play, actually. And so it's another part of me. So now you've gone and you've closed yourself off from the idea of God. Now that you've like rationalized the idea of religion away, but then you've closed it off from your true nature because at the root of it, we're all the same thing, right? And then Guar, here's Dave Brocky coming in. This is me taking directly from Paradise Lost, Divine Comedy, and just sort of interspersing it with several ideas from the record, but it's about 50% text from the Divine Comedy and 50% my own words. Dave Brocky, ladies and gentlemen, is a genius. He's just such a free artist. I've never met somebody that's closer to his instinct artistically than Dave. I've never met someone that dogs like more. I know that's a strange thing to say, but dogs hate me. But man, Dave can make friends with like the craziest dog because they're really close instinctually as far as I'm concerned. And his connection to art is absolutely beautiful. Even the grim stuff. And here I know why I know I am, right? It's like that whole existential vortex. And then it goes back to the circus, right? It's all waveforms of waveforms. It's like talking about physical reality as an illusion, and as a result of that, everything, rocks and trees and the earth and me and skin and music and sound and sex and everything, it's all just waveforms interacting at, vibrating at different levels, frequency levels, right? So he's like, show me. Okay, I know now. If it's all waveforms and it's not God and we're all God, what is it? So he's arrogant enough to assume that he's like capable of understanding what it is. So when he gets shown by this choir of angels that what he's been focusing so heavily on is something that when he stood back from, when he's got a different perspective, when he's not arrogantly assuming that he is able to control his environment, because I think on some level the character assumes that in order for him to participate in something, he has to understand its true nature. And then when he stands back, he realizes that what he's looking at is a cheeseburger. It's absurd. Of course it's absurd. It could be a boot or a rock or, whatever, a boob. It doesn't matter. It's a metaphor for the fact that everything's the same, everything's in everything, and ultimately now this person can't participate in it because he's a vegetarian, and the whole thing turns itself on its head. Right here. So like the whole idea is like when it does turn itself on its head, there's this realization and almost a profound embarrassment that this whole quest, all the masturbating, all the bullshit artistic motivation, all the headaches that come from making music like this is ultimately based in this sort of egotistical, arrogant need to prove something to people. So here I'm just freaking out, doing my lick number 2 that I know, my sweep licks.
You say beer?
It's about beer? Okay, sure, right? And then all of a sudden we're at a bar, you know what I mean? And I'm like trying to figure it out. I'm at a bar, right? So now there's a kung fu fight, and the kung fu fight's between me and Frederick from Meshuggah. Here he goes. Fred.
Something with you.
I was so stoked. I remember Fred just sending me mails going, I don't know what I can do with this part, man. It's like, you got like kung fu's and cheeseburgers and everything. But I was just like, man, dude, Fred, you're the man, man. Everybody, everybody who's in a metal band wants to be you, dude. Like, come on, just like, do it, man. Just wail on it. Show him what it's worth, man. And he just knocked it out of the park in a 15-second long chunk. I love you. Fred, I love you, buddy. Okay. So now, here comes the epiphany, right? So after the fighting and the competition and the realization and the profound understanding that perhaps you can't understand anything just by the nature of it, and there's like a cosmic and karmic joke that is there to be had, then he's saying it's bullshit. It's all bullshit. And so now the character is, it's an embarrassment, but it's also like a humbling sense where he's just like, I had no idea. It's like he's open. There's like a kaleidoscopic universe that's so far above and beyond him that there's no way to even attempt to grasp it. And at this point, it's about surrender. So he surrenders to it. So all these words and all these thoughts is coming down in waveform. It's going back to that circus part in the song. And it's a slow burn. It's like something that's taken so long to understand, but now there's no cover from it. And am I confused? It's not confusion anymore. It's absolutely just ashamed for thinking that I had control over it. there's water. It's all water, you know. It's like the divine conduit, right? Sow way, you know, sowing your own, you know, seeds, I guess, essentially, right? Fire. So come on, it's like, come on, fire, take me down. I'm ready for it. And then it's the realization. See, clouds form over these rainbows over time. All these realizations will go away. And then here's this part of me that's writing deconstruction, not participating in it. See, this is separate from it. This character. We're not done yet, are we? Go. And then it's saying, you're in God. That's the whole idea. And then the guy just trips out. It's too much for him to handle. And here's the point. Take your time. Take your time. Enjoy the ride of all we are. And the last sentiment, the artistic side of me says, I am free. How about you guys? Come away, I'm gone. Oh, and then it ends with Om. Right? Yeah, I'm a freak. We're all freaks. Let's finish this.
Let's finish this!
Poltergeist. Now, the whole idea with Poltergeist is the past, the things that had haunted me in the past, that part of my nature that I thought was self-destructive just by the sheer sense that by the fear I had of engaging in heavy music at one time was ultimately going to lead me to a place of personal malaise or personal poor decisions based on just the true nature of music rather than the fact that it was a choice that I had made, some sort of self-destructive, sort of masochistic tendency. So like this whole song is about like an exorcism of those things and saying to that part of my nature, the ghosts of my past, you don't have power over me. Because it's through this record, through the chaos, through the artistic sentiments that go into it, I have full control over it. I refuse to let that go. And the choices that I made now that I have that part of myself cornered, backed into a corner and ready to destroy is, do you kill it? So I say, die, Poltergeist. You kill it. But that's the whole idea with Ghosts, the next record, is no, you don't kill it. You make peace with it. You forgive yourself for it and you move on and recognize that this part of me that creates deconstruction, the part of me that created Strapping and Lad, is me. It's not something that I'm meant to fight. It's something for me to analyze, to make peace with, and ultimately move on from without denying it. And so the wait is like basically the demon in me saying, wait, you know what I mean? It's like, so I'm egging on, I'm like, give unto me. Come on, give me your best shot, you son of a bitch. And he's saying, no, wait. It's Dirk playing this song. Dirk also played Deconstruction, of course. These chords remind me of Misery Signals a bit. When I was working with Misery Signals, Ryan and Stu there had written a bunch of chords I thought were cool. So it's like me and myself here. Now we've come to the end. And there's a part of me, I think, that's saying, die, Poltergeist. Not the one that makes a decision to pull the trigger, but another part of me that's saying, kill it. Kill it. Come on, it's in your corner. You've got it. It's backing down. Kill it. Right here, and I am not frightened. Are we clear? Are we? You never come round. You will not be welcome. You will not. You have been vanquished. Let go. I've conquered my soul. Vanquish, now go. Exercise yourself and stand for what you truly believe in. So there's the sentiment of the whole record at the end. You know, I'm not afraid of myself anymore. Now that I've exercised not the part of me that's there, but now that I've exercised the fear of that part of me, what do you do? And so here's the conclusion. Now, we all know the peace of mind that comes from the fight. But we stand tall forever and face the one true light. And the one true light, as far as I'm concerned on an artistic level, is being true to what it is that you feel you need to do, regardless of whether or not it's cool and regardless of whether or not other people like it. So the choir is like, now we've arrived. And no one depends on me. It's all your court, right? And now it's saying, and so with our forces far from gone, You know, are you going to kill this part of you? And essentially it's like, no way. No way. Because it takes more bravery to forgive it than to kill it. And there's glory to the brave, and that glory is ultimately finding artistic peace of mind. Glory to the brave. The last word of the record is stand. So the whole idea is just like, you stand up for what it is that you want to achieve. And if you're doing anything based on fear and under accordance of what other people expect from you, you are artistically vacant, my friends. Okay, so there's Deconstruction. I knew that one was going to be a headache to do. And it's the commentary for that is very much like the record itself. It's this kind of manic frame of mind that I had to like temporarily engage in order to achieve that goal. But ultimately, as is the case with the commentary right now, was the case with the record, is that I had to prepare myself to allow one part of me to engage in that frame of mind and that type of thinking without allowing myself to lose the plot, right? And that's where we're at. So today, what do I do now? I'm going to go to the beach. And then I'm going to go home. I'm going to make some dinner. And I'm going to finish the box set. And I'll come back and do Ghost tomorrow. Okay, we're getting there, guys. I will see you tomorrow. Have a good one.